Hi, it's Paul Banis with GreatDad.com, and today I've got a interesting guest who has written a book called The Bystander. But we're really not going to talk about his book only in the context of the fact that with kids finally leaving the nest, he's been able to find time to take on a project like that. Instead, we're going to talk mostly about his role as a father, what he discovered, how being a father provided meaning, as well as when he was finally able to create an emotional bond with his children. I think this episode is interesting because John he's a regular dad like you and I. He doesn't have any pretensions to being the greatest dad in the world, though he found a lot of meaning in being a father and found opportunities to be maybe a better or more involved father than he expected, just because he embraced his role as a dad. So I hope you'll enjoy this episode. As always, you can find me at greatdad.com/go, including my coaching offerings, including a free course on gratitude for listeners of the podcast. Take care. Hey, it's Paul Banis with GreatDad.com here talking my weekly series talking to dads about modern fatherhood, and I've got a little bit of a different guest here today. I've got John David with us, who's not only has a long career in PR and crisis management, but he's written a book that we're going to talk a little bit about. But hello, John.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Appreciate it.
I really appreciate people who have the courage to start to write a book. I'm just always in awe of that. Having tried several times myself and not getting beyond 5, 10,000 words, it's not only one thing to string words together, but it's another thing to know how to tell a story. So kudos to you for doing the work.
Thanks. I appreciate it. I actually wrote a business book a few years ago, which kind of lessened some of the terror of it for me.
Yeah.
So I've done it before. Before I wrote my novel, I wrote a business book, but it is an absolutely daunting thing when you look at it. It's I'd never written anything that long before. I wrote short form stuff professionally, and so it's definitely can be an intimidating process without
Right,
question.
right. We'll talk a little bit about the book a little bit down the road, but I want to really
Okay.
talk about the most important job you've had, other than your career success and your new book is being a father. And I would imagine that having the kids now, your kids are a little bit into their 20s. That's finally given you the mind space to write a book. So, is that
That's
true?
true. I mean, that's true. I've said it many times. I mean, I think when I used to when I was single, I used to read a lot of novels and read a lot of I read a lot of thriller books and stuff like that. And um, you know, I'm old enough to the golden age of kind of thriller books was
Yeah,
happening.
right.
John
Robert
Grisham was
Ludlum and yeah,
John Grisham was launching when I was like
yeah,
in my 20s and stuff. But then I got married and had kids, and something's got to give,
yeah,
and my
yeah,
golf game went away
yeah.
because it's 5 hours on a weekend, which you don't
If you're
you,
lucky.
you just oh yeah, if you're lucky, that's right. So I pretty much my golf game went away, and I stopped reading novels because it's like time, and so I would still read. I'd read for work, and if when I was going on vacation, I usually went to the bookstore and bought books and stuff, but it was always nonfiction stuff here and there, stuff I was interested in. And then my kids went away to college, and the nest is empty, and you got a little more time, and so I kind of rediscovered novels and thrillers, and that's that was literally figuratively new chapter.
Yeah, very similar. Gave up golf because I couldn't afford the 5, 6, sometimes 7 hours to do it for a
Sure.
public course, and as well, fiction reading kind of went the wayside. Even though I was like huge reader in my 20s and before I got married, and now just in the whole idea of the empty nesting and older men finding meaning, I'm now rediscovering fiction and finding new meaning through reading some of those classic books and new books that have come along.
Yeah.
It's a worthwhile
Yeah,
endeavor.
no, it makes sense. You don't sort of think of it. I didn't honestly, it didn't really dawn on me when it was happening. I didn't really, I
Right,
mean,
right. You didn't
I,
say, "Oh, what happened to that reading thing?" Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I mean, I would still pick up a novel every once in a while and plow through
right.
something, but I mean, I could probably count on one hand how many novels I read in 20 years, And
Yeah.
now, and I was sort of like a couple of books a month guy, and then I wasn't anymore. And so, I kind of rediscovered, rediscovered novels after, had again have a little more time. Kids are out, kids are at school, kids are at college, kids are less interested in talking to you, all that good stuff.
It's not that bad, I'm sure, but
No, no, no,
still,
it's
yeah. But
not.
I know there is
It's
a lot
not.
more mind space. But so I guess that touches on one thing about having kids is you read a lot online. I mean, a lot of women talk about this all the time in their many blogs about all the things they've given up. Their body isn't the same, and they feel like they've given up their crazy days and everything. And for men too, there are a lot of things that you lose. You lose your golf game. You lose some of that time that you spend with your buddies. There's all kinds of ways to tabulate all the bad thing, all the things you've lost. But
Right.
it sounds like from the brief conversation we had starting before we started, you and I share the fact that the things that we gained were, I mean, I don't spend any one bit of mental time thinking about, wow, if I just hadn't had kids, all the great things I would have done. And it sounds like you feel the same way. They added immeasurably to how you feel about life.
Without question, without question. I was before we came on, I was sort of thinking about the kind of the global question, your life with your kids and what does it mean? And I was thinking about, I was probably about 15 years ago. I was in a meeting, and I was with a one of my clients who's older than me, but single, and another person who worked for the company, younger than me at the time, single. And I don't remember why it came up, but it was kind of like, well, what are you most proud of, like, in your life? And the answers from the other folks was, well, I started this company and we grew our market share by this, and we did this, and like last year we launched this, and my answer was, so far being a good dad. Like that was like what my answer
Right.
was.
Right.
And they were like, oh, and they kind of looked at me and they're like, oh man, like how did you, you just like buried us, in 2 seconds. You
Oh
didn't
yeah,
even,
well,
you know,
that's good if you got the feeling that they were
yeah,
giving you the kudos that were
yeah,
due.
yeah, no, they
Yeah.
were. They absolutely
Yeah.
were. They absolutely were. They're like, oh yeah, now I feel small because you're talking about something that's sort of a bigger picture thing, and that's and even, I've have conversations with, I have clients, very successful clients, and they're, they all want to talk about their kids. They all want to be, that's a big measuring stick, in life, Yeah, we all are, kind of swinging our stuff around, saying, we got this is what we've done, and this is how much we've earned, and here's my boat, and here's my house, and here's my car, But I think, a lot of those guys, a lot of those guys are also want to measure themselves by, how they do with, raising their family and being good parents and all that stuff.
And that seems to be somewhat of a generational shift. I mean, when I started Great Dad was 20 years ago, and there was definitely a big demarcation between the generation that came before dads like my dad, who he wasn't present when I was a kid, but a lot of men who got a pass at being a dad, just the idea of great dad. I mean, just showing up made you a great dad back in those days, and now I think the bar is happily a lot higher for men to be both physically and emotionally present.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I think it's true. I think, it's hard to, it's hard to it's hard to go through this whole thing of uh you know blaming your dad for everything,
Yeah,
like be that guy.
right.
There's an interesting documentary that you might find interesting. It's called Selling Superman. Have you heard about it?
Oh yeah, yeah, yep.
It's about the comic books, the
Mhm.
guy who had this massive comic book collection.
Uh-huh.
And a friend of mine was involved in the making of that documentary, and I watched it. I watched it's like 4 episode documentary. I watched it last week, and a through line to this documentary is this guy's relationship with his father. So his father was kind of on the spectrum, and he collected all these comic books, and then he passed away. But he really had he and his son did not have a really good relationship. And then his father passed away, and he left him, probably hundreds of millions of dollars worth of comic books.
Wow.
And now they're trying to figure out what to do with them. The documentary is what they're going to do about him. But the through line of the documentary talked a lot about this guy's relationship with his dad and how it was like he had like a lousy relationship with his dad. And I thought that was interesting, but a bit of a cop out, right? Because you just said, you didn't have you mentioned your relationship with your
Yeah.
father, right?
Yeah.
I
But he wasn't present. Yeah.
he wasn't present, right? So I didn't want to take words out of your mouth on that. But I know lots of guys who did not have a good relationship with their father, right? I
Right.
mean, I can start, I know lots of guys whose fathers were, they never knew their fathers, right? Or their fathers died when they were little, or their
Sure.
fathers
Sure.
were gone. And so it's hard now, in the year we're in now, 2026, to go back and sit there and say, oh yeah, it's like here's somebody whose father wasn't present, and that, that they're allowed to and I could be, somebody might be think I'm callous, but like you can't like lean on that for your whole life. You gotta say that's the way it was, and now here's how I'm gonna do it, and hopefully make be better at it, than than my father was, or kind of thing. And my father was present, but my father, he's now, gonna be 86, and I was, when I was this is the 70s, the early 80s is a different time, it's a
Yeah.
different time. And and so when it was my turn, I chose to do it differently,
Yeah, I wouldn't ever say that somebody should lean like, I mean, trauma, whether it's small T or big T, trauma is something to deal with. It's not something to use as an excuse for everything that happens.
Right.
You're understanding and realizing and moving through
Yeah.
it, and moving on is one thing
Yeah.
about that. But I think the great thing is that we have an opportunity in our generations now to be better dads and to step up and be that type of person and leave a legacy for our kids that's a lot better than some of us had. Because I just know personal experience, if you don't have a dad present, either emotionally, physically, you are lacking in something that a lot of people kind of take for granted. But
Sure.
people are
Sure.
thrown all kinds of other traumas,
Right.
poverty,
Right.
sickness,
Right. Right.
million one
Right.
other things. It's not an
Right.
excuse, but
Right.
it is something we have to deal with, and it is one thing that we as dads can do to help the emotional safety of our kids, which I think is paramount. So when you had your kids, because this is always something when I coach dads, a lot of them are confused about. Can you remember the first time that you felt something akin to the way your partner felt about emotional attachment? Because I think a lot of dads, the baby comes and they feel like immediately like, okay, I'm in charge of this baby. I'm safe. I'm going to take care of this baby. I feel the family unit coalescing, but the emotional bond with the baby doesn't happen for quite some time. And a lot of men feel really guilty, like, what's wrong with me? I don't feel like this. Just this way my partner feels about the baby. Do you remember when that started for you?
Honestly, it started very early when
Oh yeah,
after
okay.
my kids were born. Yeah. I mean, I was, um, very much in tune with what was happening in my household, and part of it was that I was pretty good at I'm the calm one in my house.
Hmm.
And so whenever my kids were kind of fussy, I was pretty good with them, and that I was kind of I think I like to believe that my daughter, when I was holding my daughter, it was my first child, my oldest, that she was fussy and she was crazy or whatever, that, the heart rate was a little lower with dad, that, the hands are a little bit bigger with dad, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I felt that connection, pretty early on. And I felt, but I always felt, really, um, I really started to feel like an adult, when you have kids. Like that's a big thing. I remember I used to,
Yeah.
back before we had like automatic, debits of our mortgage payment. I used to always remember I would walk my mortgage payment to the mailbox and put the little flag up and go, man, I'm an adult. Like this is
Right.
like an
Yeah.
adult. I gotta do like I got responsibility, man. And I don't think I felt that. I had a mortgage before I had a kid, but I never felt I never felt the weight of the mortgage payment the same way as when I had a family. And
Hmm.
so I was pretty in tune with my kids when they were little. So it was great.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Yeah, I think you're maybe a little bit of an outlier there. A lot of dads don't have that same experience until their kids are about around the 2 year mark. And maybe some of that has to do with the physical closeness. It's the skin on skin contact, the closeness, and maybe feeling that you were right from the get-go fulfilling a role that needed to be fulfilled in the house that your partner, without value judgment here, but
Well, yeah, no, listen,
you were complimentary to her
yeah, no, I mean,
goal
listen,
there.
everybody has
Yeah,
a moment
right.
when the kid's making them nuts, right? It's
Yeah,
like there's always like that moment when it's like, I've always just been the kind of the calm one.
yes,
So, um, that was for me, and my, my wife's very typical. She's a worrier. She's really good at it. She could, win the worrying Olympics, right?
yeah,
And so, I found that I had to counterbalance that, and so that was how I did it. As
yeah.
my kids got older, I mean, it's one of those things. There's a movie line. I forget what when that I remember. It was like, oh, I forget what it was, which movie it was, but the guy basically says, the dad says, "You left just when you were getting interesting." His kids, I have to remember the movie. Um, and they definitely, it's definitely, I think once you can kind of like, uh, horse around with them a little bit more, I think
Well, that's
guys are more in tune to that,
yeah,
when they're more like, in other words, right, you can't, you gotta, when they're, particularly when you're your first kid, and you don't know what you're doing,
right, right,
they show up, there's no keys, there's no manual, there's no, there's a lot of people telling you what to do, and a lot of
right,
people telling you what to do who you don't like to like you're not like being told what to do kind of person,
right.
or how they're
Or you're
telling
doing it
you.
wrong because you're a
Yeah,
man. You don't know how to
I don't want
change
to
a
be told I'm
diaper.
doing it wrong. I can tell I'm doing it wrong. And so I think we get into that. And I think once they get a little bit bigger, and then you can horse around, and you can, whatever, they'll jump on you in the pool and all that. I think
Right.
dads get, kind of, that's another layer,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, I think that well that's definitely the experience that I hear from most men I coach is that type of thing. It's when you can start to get to that level of play, interaction, that the relationship changes for the dad and suddenly feels like, oh wow, I'm totally in it. Not that he didn't care before, but
Yeah,
some men do feel really bad early on because it's just a litany of to-do lists and they just feel like, oh, come in here and do this, change that bottle, wash that thing, but they don't feel the
sure.
same.
Yeah, no, and I think that there's, you have different things. There's like, first thing is, I think the first couple years with your kids, most people, we all kind of forget, because you're sleep deprived,
Yeah,
there's so much going on. It's such a new thing. And, you kind of have this like amnesia about what it was like, because you see what the payoff is now, and you realize it was worth it. But at the moment of impact, it's hard. It's hard to get up at, 3 o'clock in the morning. It's hard to not get sleep, and some people it's really, really tricky. And I think and I mean, I was at a soccer game or something once with my kids, my son, I think. And there was one of the dads there was they had a newborn, and he's a lawyer, and he goes, yeah, sometimes I'm like happy when I have like depositions out of town because then I can go and get sleep. And my wife wanted to like reach over and strangle him to the
yeah,
ground,
right.
She's like, how dare you
Yeah,
say
you
something
left.
like that about
Right.
your kid? But I was like, I get it, like I don't feel that way, but I get it. I get, I get it's hard, it's like we're not, we live our life for a certain, probably as you're an older dad might be even trickier.
Oh,
Because
easier and trickier at the same time. That's
yeah, because I think there's flips that there's parts that are easier and parts that are harder. And so I think part of that is you have to learn how to, you have to learn how to do different things. And also you realize, like, listen, I'm sacrificing now. I'm sacrificing for another
yeah.
human being. And there's, listen, a lot of men, a lot of women, they're not interested in sacrifice.
This is so true, and those people, you'd love to be able to say to them all, "Don't have kids, and don't wait till you
Sure,
have kids to discover that. Do a little
sure,
introspection before you do,
sure.
because it's an endless. It's 20 years of sacrifice, no matter which how badly you're doing it. So there's still going to be sacrifice.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. We've all met those people. Like, why do you have them?
Yeah.
You don't seem to like care about them very much. Why are you doing this?
So speaking of sacrifice, I don't know if this was sacrifice for you, but you said before we started about how you kind of got thrown into a whole bunch of different things, Cub Scouting, leadership, and things maybe you weren't really expecting to do in midlife. Tell me a little bit about some of those activities. I guess mostly in the vein of like I didn't really want to do this, but it turned out okay, or I still hated it, but I loved the fact that I did it. Or
I'll tell you, I was so wrong, like, about Scouting, for example, was one I was
Uh,
just completely wrong. Um, my son came home. He was in the first grade or second grade or whatever. Somebody did a presentation at the elementary school, and they hooked him. And came home. And he's like, I want to join the Cub Scouts. I can go camping. I can go shoot bows and arrows. We shoot BB guns. I want to do all this stuff,
sounds
you
great.
know? And he's like, I want to join the Cub Scouts. And I was a Cub Scout
Yep.
like many years ago.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
And I was like, I looked at my son. I'm like, well, why would you want to go do that? Are you
Oh,
are
really?
you crazy? I'm like, are you crazy? And then my wife said, listen, the meeting's next Tuesday. You're taking him. And I was like, okay. And I went to this meeting, and they were talking it all up, and then they split the kids off. They moved the boys to go. They brought up, they made paper airplanes or something, and
Yep.
all the adults, we were sitting around a table, and a guy sits down and he goes, okay, so there's six parents here. Well, that's going to be a Cub Scout den, and who wants to be in charge? And you watched whatever, five or six guys kind of go look up at the sky and
Yeah, right. Voluntold.
try to become invisible, you know.
Right.
And I met a guy there who I've now becomes now one of my best friends, and now been my friend now for 15 years. He said, listen, I can't be the leader, but I'm willing to do whatever I can do. I just don't have
Yeah.
time to be the leader, but I'm definitely here to,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
to do whatever I can do. And I looked at him and I was like, going, who is that guy? Why, how come I didn't think of that answer?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a
You
good
know?
answer.
And then they picked the guy to be the leader of the Cub Scout den. And I think he felt guilted into it, and he didn't really have the time to do it. And he wasn't good at it. And one day there was an event that was coming up like a week away, and one of the other parents who kind of knew a little more about the scouts than I did was like, our boys aren't going to be able to aren't going to be able to do this event because so and so hasn't done anything yet. And I was like, okay, wait a second, let me think about this. Okay, wait, so they're going to be this big thing, and like the only kids who aren't going to participate are our kids because we haven't, we don't have our act together. And I was like, I couldn't disappoint my son like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was bad. It was like, shit, that's bad, man. Like, I don't want to do that. And so I took over,
Yeah.
and I took over. I had a meeting at my house, and we built there's the little boats. They put these boats called the rain gutter regatta. It's all coming back to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Built these little boats, put them in a rain gutter, take out a straw, blow them across down the thing. It's weird, kind of gross. But anyway, kids love it, boys love it. And I was like, and I became the, de facto den leader, and it went from there. I just kind of, I did it my way ish, and I ended up with, a core group of boys, and we kind of went through Cub Scouts, we went to Boy Scouts, and four of them, I was a den leader, I'm sorry, scout leader. And, four boys in my group became Eagle Scouts.
Yeah. It's
Proud of
what's
that.
interesting when just the generational change though. When I was a kid, it was den mothers. There wasn't a thing as den
Yeah.
fathers. It was
Yeah.
den mothers, I think.
There's your thing. My
Yeah.
father, oh, I mentioned before, he was 86. He used to jokingly call me the den mother.
Yeah. Because it was
It's
all mom.
generationally, that's who
Yeah.
he is. That's generationally his sense of humor. And I would say, that's like politically incorrect. And by the way, it's only funny once, It's like, let it go, Dad. Like,
It
I
is.
think, here's my point. You're okay. I get it. You think it's funny. It's fine. It was a little bit funny, but now we're not going to, now we're not going to keep talking about it like that.
So did that give you, because I think a lot of people, kicking and screaming into a lot of activities that you do with kids end
Sure.
up discovering things about themselves or experiences that they never would have had the kid hadn't dragged them into them. Are there things like that that you did that you've turned
Oh,
into new
absolutely. I
hobbies or
mean,
loves?
absolutely. I mean, I went, with my son, we went and did we canoed the boundary waters
Oh
between the
yeah,
United States and
in
Canada
Minnesota.
and Minnesota. I'm not sure where you're on the West Coast, right, Paul?
Yeah, but I'm from Minnesota.
Oh, you're from Minnesota. So we did the
North of
boundary
right.
waters. It's
Yeah,
called
wow,
Northern
that's a
Tier.
great thing.
And I mean, I spent a week, canoeing with my son and a couple other dads and a bunch of boys. And It was great. It was incredible. I've got stories for forever.
Forever. Yeah.
It was amazing, and I never would have imagined when I first started in Cub Scouts that I would have done that. I never would have imagined that I would have done that, and I never would have imagined I would have enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed it.
So I did want to talk about the big theme is meaning, and I don't know if you're prepared for that kind of deep philosophical discussion about parenting, fatherhood, and life's meaning. Is there any aha that you've had about what life is all about? I mean, you're a little bit younger than I am, but still, you get to a certain point in your life and you look back and all these things fit together. Were you a good person? Were you a good dad? What does it all mean? Legacy?
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
We're all the aging Matt Damon at the cemetery and I lead a good life. Tell me I led a good life.
Yeah.
Um, I think for me the biggest thing is just, with my son and my daughter was that I was around and that I was there for them and I could answer, I could help them out if they needed help, and one thing I learned from my dad was that most people are independent thinkers, and really you reach a point in your life with your parent where you're really just you don't need them to tell you what to do, but you would need them to be there if you need help, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the moment when I became a more valuable player,
Yeah.
was that I realized I can be the guy. I'm not going to tell them what to do, but they know if they got a question, I'm going to give them an answer, you
Yeah.
know? So
That,
like, I think that was probably when I that was that I turned some kind of corner there, you know. I mean, I wanted
mm,
to be there a lot. I probably wanted to be there earlier than I was.
yeah.
Oh, it didn't present itself as early as I may have wanted it to, but
Well,
that was probably a big thing.
that's interesting uh, that has been a recent epiphany because I think one of the key roles that we play as parents, and I don't know if dads are any more than moms, but is providing safety or the illusion of safety to our kids at all time, and kids who feel safe do have better mental health outcomes than kids who did not feel safe for whatever reason during their
Right,
childhoods. And that kind of safety, what you're talking about, is being there for your kids, being less didactic, but being there to help them, support them, ask them questions, and just be there. Is that ongoing, that bar of safety that you've provided ever since they were very
right.
small?
Yeah, no, it's true, and I think it just evolves. They always say,
Yeah.
bigger kids, bigger problems,
Yeah.
whatever.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, for me, what I really, one of the things that I'm proud of my kids who are now, again, 26 and 24, is I feel as though they will come to me and ask me if they
Yeah.
ask me for help if they need it,
Yeah.
and that they know they're not going to get, like, wickedly judged.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And that's something that, you know, um, my son went through a little thing recently where he did something, he was moronic basically. Um, and he called me, and, he needed some help, get out
Yeah.
of a little bit of a jam,
Yeah.
and I'm glad he did,
Yeah.
I had kind of told him, I kind of warned him that this something could happen to him, that he could have. I told him about, there was a trap, basically one of life's little traps,
Yeah.
and he walked right into it. He knew it was. I told him all about it, and he
Mhm.
walked right into it.
Yeah. Well.
And so what do you do? So, but I'm glad. But he called me, he owned up to it. He goes, I need some help, and I was like, I helped him
Yeah.
fix it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that I, hopefully for both my kids, I have a relationship I have with my kids, that I'm not gonna lecture them. I'm gonna, because
Right.
they're like, because they come from me. They know I don't want to be lectured. I like there's nobody who's more upset about screwing up than me. Like, when I
Yeah.
screw up, I don't need someone to remind me that I screwed up. Um, I know it. So what I need is to move on. Help. I need help solving it.
Hey, Um, is there any advice? I mean, it sounds like you've done a pretty good job by all measures with the two of them. Is there any advice that you'd have for younger dads or dads of any age that with younger kids, or younger dads with younger kids, that you learned along the way? Something either you did or didn't do?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is that you have we all have a capacity to do things that we don't necessarily um, think we can do, you
Yeah. Oh
know?
yeah.
And that's like, and some people are really good at it. Some people you can say, oh, well, somebody will look at a physical task, right? Or riding a skateboard or whatever, riding a bike, surfing, whatever, some physical task and go, I can't do that. And other people are like, oh, I'm going to figure that one out. Right.
Right.
Um, we have a tremendous capacity to learn and to evolve, as people. And I think the biggest thing is that, as a new parent, there's no we were talking about they don't come with instructions, but there's no super playbook either, because you don't know what your kid's going to end up doing. You don't know if your kid's going to end up. First thing is you may have, I mean, I have, two brothers, so I have no sisters, but I have a daughter, and I have like I don't know how to raise a daughter. I had no idea what girls go through and how girls
Right.
handle things. Super educational and incredibly enlightening, and feel so lucky that I had a daughter first.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Me too.
and then but at the same time, it's like you have a capacity. So there's guys who like have daughters, and they're like going, oh no, I can't, I'm not going to be able to, who's going to watch the football game with me, who's going to go fishing with me. I'm like, oh, well, but there's all these other interesting things you're going to be able to do but you have to kind of, you got
Yeah.
to embrace
But
it.
she may open up to you that you
You got
never even
Yeah,
thought of as
yeah, and you got
experiences.
to
Yeah.
embrace it. So
Yeah.
when they say, listen, you got to go to this meeting, you can either go and say and go kicking and screaming, or you can go and you can embrace it. And I really learned a lot from scouting with my son. Is I realized, there were a lot of dads there who didn't want to be there, and they very clearly did not want to be there. And
Yeah.
so the instant that their son said, I'm not sure I want to go today, Dad, they were like, okay, and
Right.
they were
Right.
gone, and they would never come back. And because I used to always tell people, I said, listen, I can't, a kid cannot, in 2026, and talking about boys, the boys in scouting, because that's when it was Boy Scouts
Yeah.
when I was there. Um, an 8-year-old boy can't drive himself to a meeting. He's parents got to take him.
Right.
And so
Right.
the parents have to be involved. They gotta want to be involved. And if they're not, then they're gonna deny that experience to their kid, and they're gonna make
Yeah.
it really easy for that kid to basically,
Bail.
bail out.
Yeah.
And so you have to, for me, it's embrace this something different, because
Yeah.
you don't get to recreate your childhood with your kid. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
it's going to be
that's
a
a trap.
different, it's
Yeah.
going to be a different, yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's going to be different. And it's just like, it's the same thing I'm learning as my kids are older now. You know, I always think about how great it was when we could just take the kids, throw them in the back of the minivan and go do whatever we wanted. Right. So I'm in Florida. We live, 3 hours from Disney World. We could go to Disney World, right? Piece of cake, right? Um, but but then they get older and they start having their own activities and they have their own friends, and guess what? It starts to get trickier. And now when they're in their 20s, it's even trickier. It's like, okay, what are we going to do for the holidays? What are we going to do? We've got to, and basically, I've realized it's going to be different every year. It's never going to be exactly the same. We're not going to have that kind of level of, this is how we're going to do it, according to mom and dad's plan. That's not going to happen
Yeah.
anymore. But
Yeah.
so embrace the fact that when they're little, you have actually a lot more control than you think.
Yeah. Right. When they're portable. Yeah.
Yeah, and then realize that they get older, it's going to be, it's basically it's a moving target.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but
Let's talk a little
it's
bit
fun
about
in
your
its own
book.
way.
Let's talk a little bit about your book, which is called The
Sure.
Bystander. Bystander. Yeah.
Yep.
And is it already out, or is it still in?
It's out. It came out. It was released in September of 2025.
Okay. Okay. You want to give the premise and what drove you to
Sure.
be interested in
Sure.
this
Yeah.
subject?
So my book, it's a mystery with some thriller elements. It falls into that. I call it a mystery. Some people call it a thriller. There's all kinds of definitions. We could have a whole conversation about the definitions, which wouldn't be that interesting. And it follows a television reporter. And this all sort of happens in the first chapter, so I'm not giving it away. There's no spoilers going to happen here. So, television reporter is out on a Friday night filming a kind of a lifestyle piece for the TV news, and he's at a local retail complex, outdoor retail complex, and an active shooter incident begins. A guy enters the retail complex with a gun, with a assault rifle, and but then something interesting happens, amazing happens. Uh, a bystander, a guy in the crowd, an armed bystander, kills the active shooter. The television reporter films the whole thing. The video goes viral. The bystander becomes a hero, but all is not as it seems.
Mm.
And the mystery moves from there. And
Plot twist.
so that's the setup. Um, the rest of the story is the book.
Yeah, right.
And it came out in September of last year, 2025. It's been a fun ride. It's kind of it's not my it's my side hustle. I still have my regular job. It's just my side hustle. Um, and it's but the so far so good. The book's it's won some awards. Was named one of the best thrillers of
Yeah,
2025.
cool. Yeah.
And so it's been an exciting experience so far.
So was writing a book always a dream of yours, or was this something that popped into your head and said, I got to put this down, or how did it come about?
You know, I had I would say that I've had ideas over my lifetime, like, oh, like this could be a book, or this could be a novel or whatever. But I didn't really have, I don't think until now, until recently, I don't think I had the life experiences to really do it. I don't think I had the talent to really do it. And then, once my kids were kind of, once we were sort of empty nesters and I had a little bit more time, that's when the idea really kind of crystallized. I had this idea for this book, and I was just crazy enough to do it. So I just took a shot, took a run at it,
So
and here we are.
for people who are thinking like, oh, I wish I could write a book. How many years did it take from idea to
Honestly, it
finish?
didn't take years. I mean,
It
it
didn't
took
take
me.
years.
I wrote the first manuscript. It took me about 5 months to write the manuscript, the
Yeah.
first draft, and then I went and I hired a freelance editor to review it for me and give me feedback. And then I got it to the point as far as I thought I could take it as a manuscript, and I started taking it out to try to find a publisher, try to find an agent and a publisher.
That takes a while.
That part took a long time. That took
Yeah.
18 months.
Yeah. So, and
So
did you have so you've got the bystander and the shooting incident. Was the crux of the matter trying to find the plot twist, or did you have the plot twist and then built the story around it?
So I honestly, there's a couple, there's really, they say there's two types of writers, novel writers. There's plotters, who plan everything out, and there's pantsers who kind of go by the seat of their pants. And I'm a pantser.
Yeah.
So I had the idea. I kind of knew where I wanted the story to go, and I knew how I thought I wanted it to end. But the to me, the fun for me is the journey and
Yeah.
figuring it out and coming up with kind of twists along the way. And for me, it's always interesting because they sort of hit me out of the blue. Like I'll be exercising in the morning, I'll go, oh wait, this could happen, or I'll be in the shower, oh this could happen, or I'm half asleep, I'm waking up in the morning thinking about it, going, oh wait, we could do this instead. And that's where the magic is for me. And I'm not saying my book is magic. I'm just saying it's what drives me and makes it fun for me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very interesting. I've heard all kinds of different theories about some people that just start with the characters and they like to develop the characters to the point where the characters are the ones who decide what the action is going to be. I don't know how you come up with any kind of narrative arc where everything comes together and then it resolves itself if you just let
Yeah,
people do
I
what
don't
they
know. Is
want.
that what's the line? You chink away everything until the sculpture's there
Oh,
or
right, right.
whatever.
Everything that doesn't look like an elephant or
Everything that doesn't look like an elephant.
yeah.
I mean, come on. I don't know. I
That's
can't.
our yeah.
I can't be. I can't. That's not me. That's not
Yeah.
me.
That's the
Um,
big empty canvas approach.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, I generally have an idea of, I have an I, I've now. So I was fortunate enough that I was signed to write a 3-book series, and so I'm now the second book actually comes out in May, in my series, and I'm working on the third one, and I've they all start with kind of an interesting premise, ripped from the headlines ish kind of premise, because and then move from there, and that's what drives me is like, I find myself coming up with these ideas like going, wait, that could be interesting, or wait, that could be interesting, but I'm still trying to finish the third book in the series and meet my obligations, and do my regular job and, keep making the mortgage payment and all that
Yeah.
good stuff. So
Okay.
it's all those things keep, emerging,
Okay.
so there's only so
Well,
many of them to
congratulations,
do.
especially for a three book deal.
Thank you so much. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Okay. Well, John David, thank you very much for joining me today. People can find you at byjohndavid.com or byjohndavid.substack.com. But I suppose the byjohndavid.com is probably where you got all your materials, and that'll link you to
Absolutely.
the
Yeah. And my book's available. If I can make the plug, my
plug.
book's
Sure.
available, everywhere books are sold online. So Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, bookshop.org, all those places. It's from Thule Publishing in California. It's available everywhere. It's not going to
Great.
be in your local bookstore, but it will be any place you look online. If you look for the Bystander, you're going to find it, which is great.
Okay. Great. All right. Paul Baines with GreatDad.com. You can find my coaching offerings at GreatDad.com/go, including a free course on gratitude that you find on that page. So until next time, remember, a strong family starts with you. Bye.